Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Steve and I like making videos about wildlife photography, landscape photography, macro photography, and today I'm doing one about equipment actually. So if you like that sort of content and you haven't already subscribed to my channel, if you can consider subscribing, that'll be great. And if you do subscribe, if you can press the little bell icon, you'll be notified when my next video is uploaded. So yeah, what am I doing today? What I'm actually doing is testing out my vlogging camera. So this is the camera that I normally use to make my videos on, and it's a fairly modest, just above entry level Nikon D5600. But I thought actually it'd be a really good idea to test this camera out and see if you can take successful wildlife images with it, because often, you know, when you see people on YouTube, you know, people are using really good equipment, you know, top of the range Canons, Nikons, Sonys, and I try and use my better cameras. Obviously I've got a Nikon Z6 II that I use for wildlife photography and filming. I've got a Nikon D500 and they're great cameras, both of those, but I thought actually it would be worth trying the entry-level camera, or just above entry level, and seeing if that works for wildlife photography. And I've come out on a really dull, murky day because I don't want to make this camera's life any easier. If the light was really good and really bright and contrasty, it makes it easier for the autofocus, and I would be shooting with lower ISO numbers. So we're going to put it through its paces in less than ideal conditions, and I think that's a good idea. So as I say, this is a D5600. It costs around about £500, and I've coupled it with the 200 to 500mm zoom lens, the Nikon. And I didn't want to use my prime lens because, again, I wanted this to be a fairly you know, modest setup. Now it's still a lot of money, you know, £500 for the body, or $550 I think new. I bought this second hand. And then the lens, this is about £1,000 I think, something like that. But you could buy the Sigma 150 to 600, and that's £600 or £700. So although it's a lot of money, it's not like, you know, top of the range DSLRs or mirrorless. I mean, the Sony A1s, I think £5,500. The Nikon Z9 will be over 5,000. Canons, the R5's 4,500. So we're talking about a lot of money for those camera bodies. So this is £500 body and £1,000 lens, and we'll see how it gets on. Now, what I'm really interested in finding out is how good, firstly, the autofocus is. And this has got a reasonably good autofocus system. I've got plenty of options when it comes to the amount of autofocus points. I can shoot with 1 point, 9 points, 21 points. I can use focus tracking. So we'll see how all of that works. Then I also want to find out how good the high ISO performance is. This is a 24 megapixel sensor, and it's an APS-C sensor, so it's about 2/3 of the size of a full frame sensor. So how does this cope with higher ISOs? You know, something like 1600, 3200, maybe 6400. You know, is the noise control good enough? Is the autofocus good enough? The one thing I already know is the frame rate, the frames per second, isn't anywhere near as fast as the top end bodies. The Sony, I think it's 20 frames a second now. My Nikon D500 is 10 frames a second. This shoots 5 frames a second. But having said that, I think that's going to be enough. You know, yes, I might miss the odd shot because in between taking one shot and the next shot on a burst, but does that really matter? Probably not. So what I'm going to do now is I've already taken quite a few pictures of the wildlife here, and we've got lots of pictures that I can get back home, have a look on the computer, put them on this video, and we can have a look and see how good or not they are. But at the moment, yes, looking okay. I'm at a local lake because I want multiple subjects. I don't want to be waiting, you know, an hour to get, you know, a photograph of an animal. I want lots of subjects. So I've got common stuff, you know, there's mallard, there's great crested grebes, there's geese, Egyptian geese, barnacle geese, Canada geese. I've seen a heron fly across. There's cormorants as well. So, you know, the species are common, but I don't think that matters, because what I really want is lots of picture taking opportunities to test this camera out. So yeah, I'm going to spend the next couple of hours doing that, and we'll see how we go. So I'll speak to you soon, guys. With this first series of pictures, started off with quite an easy job for the camera. We've got 4 pictures of a tufted duck. The first one was shot at ISO 1600, and I was using a 9 points on the autofocus system, and as you can see, the noise control isn't bad. There is noise there, but at 1600 ISO, not too bad. On the second picture, I was using a single AF point, and you can see the autofocus has worked on both occasions very well. The 9-point AF focus array on the first picture has got that tufted duck in sharp focus, and then on the second one, using that single AF point and making sure the AF point is on the head of the duck, that's also worked well. Now with the second two pictures of the tufted duck, I was shooting at ISO 640, and you can see there's definitely less noise there. And again, I varied my autofocus from either using a single point or 9-point AF, and you can see that again, you know, both pictures are in sharp focus. And then moving on, we've got the Egyptian duck, and this was shot at an even lower ISO, an ISO of 640, and there's hardly any noise there at all. So I think at that ISO number, we're getting a really good quality image. And again, on the first shot, I used a 9 AF points, and on the second shot, I used a single AF point on the head. And then the last picture of this grey lag goose, that was shot at ISO 3200. And you can see there is definitely noise creeping in there now. Now, it's not an unusable picture by any means, but at 3200, the noise is becoming noticeable. Now, we could use noise reduction software, and that will get rid of a big part of that problem. So to sum up so far, ISO 1600, quality is not bad at all. There is noise, but it's not super bad. ISO 640, the noise is, you know, is unnoticeable really, which is great. ISO 800, I think that's pretty good as well. 3200, the noise is becoming noticeable, but it's not a deal breaker. So far the autofocus has worked well using either a single AF or a group of 9 AF points, and the noise from a base of 640 up to 3200, you can see there's varying degrees of noise, but at the lower levels, the 640, the ISO 800, it's fine. The 1600 is pretty good. 3200, it's borderline but still usable. We've also got to bear in mind that the light quality is really poor at the moment. It's misty, it's murky, so that reduces the overall contrast of the image, and it makes it harder for the autofocus to lock onto our subject. So all in all, you know, this camera's performed really well. Later on in this video, I've got some pictures of a black-headed gull, and I'll crop in really tight to show you the effect of the ISO, different ISOs on that subject. So that's later on in this video. So for now, I think I'll cut back to a pista camera on location, and we're going to look at a mallard that's coming in to land and how the autofocus coped with that sort of situation. During the first test, I also used the automatic focus, so where the camera's picking the subject for us, and I used 3D focus tracking, and you know, both of those were okay, but I tend to use either a single AF or 9 autofocus points, or on my D500 I'll use a group of 5 autofocus points. So they're the sort of focus arrays that I like to use when I'm doing wildlife photography, so I'm more comfortable using them on this test as well. I don't normally promote my photography courses on my YouTube channel, but I hope you'll indulge me in a little bit of shameless self-promotion as it's getting near Christmas. I run lots of photography courses all over the UK, both wildlife and landscape courses, and I do a couple in Europe as well. And alongside my sort of location courses, I've also got a website dedicated to all my online photography courses. And I've got a beginner photography course, an intermediate photography course, and an advanced course. I've got courses on wildlife and macro photography. I've got online courses on landscape photography, and some studio photography courses as well. So if you're interested in an online course that's downloadable or streamable, then I'd really appreciate it if you checked out my website. I'll put a link in the description below to my main online photography courses website, and I'll put a link to my location courses website. They're two separate websites, but they both start with Steve Hedges Photography. So one is stevehedgesphotography.co.uk, and the other one is stevehedgesphotographyonlinecourses.com. So as I say, I'll put some links in if you're in the looking for a course either online or actually a in-person course where I will I'm teaching in person. Then perhaps you can take a look at that. And yeah, I'm not going to waste any more of your time on this, but as I say, the links to both my websites will be down in the description below this video. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. Right, hi guys, welcome back. I've been photographing for about an hour and a half or so. I've just got some pictures of black-headed gulls having a bath, but it's good practice. And I won't know how good the high ISO performance when it comes to noise control is until I get the pictures back on a big screen. But I've shot at ISO 800, 1600, 3200, and then before I go I'll probably shoot a few at 6400, but I'll need to get the pictures up on a big screen to really see how the noise, the camera's coping with the noise. But when it comes to the autofocus, it looks good actually. So I've got some shots of black-headed gulls in flight, and they look okay actually, so it looks like the autofocus is tracking fine. And then I had this mallard come flying straight towards the camera, and I've got 5 or 6 shots, or maybe 4 or 5 shots, and at least 4 out of the 5 or 5 out of the 6 are sharp. And that's really good, because when something's flying towards the lens, it's a lot harder for the autofocus to keep up than when it's flying across the lens. So if those pictures are dead sharp and looking at the back of the screen they look sharp, then that's really good. It means this camera I can definitely use for wildlife photography. Now the last one just before it landed was soft, and it's probably because the autofocus just couldn't keep up for that last little bit. It could be user error, so it might be me, I need to check that. But the fact of the matter is, if I've got 5 out of the 6 shots that are sharp, then that's good enough for this sort of entry-level sort of camera body. Now, would I use this instead of my other camera bodies for wildlife? Of course, wildlife photography, of course I wouldn't. I'd always pack my D500 on my Nikon Z6 II. But the fact of the matter is, if this was the only camera body I had, let's say one of my other camera bodies had broken down, then I could certainly successfully use this by the looks of things for wildlife photography. So that's great. £500 camera body, it's looking good. Now, if, as I say, I had the choice, I'd pick my D500 or my Z6 II, or if someone was going to kindly drop a Nikon Z9 into my camera bag, then of course I would use that instead. But that's a lot of money. You're talking again, £5,000, £6,000. So for £500, this camera body seems to be doing a really great job. So we're not quite finished on this video yet. I need to get the pictures back home on a big screen. We'll have a look at those and make sure that this is really nailed the shots that I need it to get right and to get sharp and with fine detail, even though we're shooting at high ISOs. So yeah, I hope you liked this video so far. If you have liked it, if you can give it a thumbs up, a like, that always helps my channel. And I'll speak to you in a little while, guys, when we get back home. So bye for now. Here's a series of shots of the mallard flying towards the camera, and in actual fact there's 9 in this sequence. And if you look at the first shot, that's the mallard's quite a distance away, and the autofocus system's locked on to that mallard very well. And I'm using again a 9 AF points. That's the autofocus system I'm using. And as the mallard's flying towards me, it's keeping that mallard in focus, which is really good, because as I said earlier, when something's flying towards the camera, it's a lot harder for the autofocus system to keep track of that subject or that animal. And it's only until we get to the last 2 pictures actually the autofocus is just starting to drop off. It's not quite keeping that mallard in focus. And that's a shame, because I think both those last 2 pictures would have been great if they'd been in sharp focus. They're only just slightly out, but they are out. So with this, we've got the first 7 shots. It's done a fantastic job, and then it's just dropping out in the last 2. So I'm guessing if I'd been using my D500, there's a good chance that all of those pictures would have been in sharp focus. The autofocus has done well, but not quite as well as a top-end camera body. But can it take good pictures of birds in flight, especially in bad lighting conditions? Yeah, obviously that it can, and we've just proved that with this sequence of images. Here we have the series of pictures that I mentioned earlier of the black-headed gull, and on the first shot, this is the full frame picture, and this picture was taken at ISO 800, and it looks almost noise-free, very good quality. And even when we crop in a bit tighter, you can see at ISO 800 the noise control from the D5600 is doing well. It's a very good quality image. And then the next picture was shot at ISO 1600, and we've got the first picture is the full frame version, and then even when I crop in tighter at ISO 1600 it's not bad at all, so I'd be happy to use this image. And then for some inexplicable reason I didn't shoot this or photograph this black-headed gull at ISO 3200. I just missed that out completely. So I've dropped a picture of the grey-lag goose in, and this was shot at 3200 ISO, and you know, there is grain there, but it's still usable in my opinion. And then the last shots of the black-headed gull, this was shot at ISO 6400. So on the first picture we've got the full frame image, and you can see the noise there, and then we crop in tighter, you can see there's a lot of noise, and I think probably at this ISO it's an unacceptable amount of noise, and I wouldn't want to use that. So I would, you know, shoot up to 3200, but I think I wouldn't shoot at 6400. The only thing I would say in sort of as a caveat really is if you're shooting a high key image, so you've got mainly light tones throughout the picture, you tend to get less noise turn up in the high key areas, so the lighter areas of the picture. So if it's a high key picture throughout, then you can probably get away with shooting at a higher ISO number than you would normally. If you've got lots of darker or mid-tones and dark tones, so you've got a lower key image, then that noise is going to show up more, so it's worth thinking about that. It was really quite handy actually, because this heron just flew over the lake, and as you can see here we've got quite a complex background. So there's trees behind this this heron, and if you look at the first picture, the autofocus didn't lock on at all, so the heron's totally out of focus. But by the second picture it did manage to lock onto the heron, and when we get to the third image you can see the heron's still in focus. So once it was locked on, it maintained that focus. So all in all I was quite pleased about that really, because it's one thing to get a bird in flight with a really clear background, you know, just a plain sky, but when the background's quite complex like we've got here with all these different, you know, trees and branches and leaves, it's harder for that autofocus to lock onto your main subject. And even though it took a little while to do that, you know, lock onto that main subject, on the second and third picture it did, and it kept it in focus. So again, quite impressive really. Probably did as good a job as maybe my D500, possibly. Hi guys, it's a couple of days since I started testing out the D5600 camera body for wildlife photography, and as you've already seen, I was shooting in really dull, murky conditions because I wanted to really push the body to its extreme, so shooting the worst possible conditions, and it did a good job. The autofocus worked well, and I don't know about the high ISO performance yet because I haven't zoomed in on the pictures. I'm going to do that this afternoon, and I'll put those on this video of course, and you may have already seen those. And now I thought to give the body a chance, actually it'd be a good idea to shoot in good conditions. So we've got really nice directional sunlight, and that makes it easier for the autofocus system to work, easier to lock onto the animal. And I've come down to my local riverbank just to test out the body in good light, and I photographed swans and gulls basically. So nothing too exciting, but again I just want to put this camera body through its paces, and it's done really well. It's locked onto the gulls in flight, done really well there, and where I've got the swans and they're not moving around, of course it's done well, the autofocus system in that situation. I've been shooting with a low ISO number, ISO 200, so it means the image quality should be really good, and again I'm going to check that this afternoon and put those pictures on the end of this video. Now in conclusion, so far in the field testing it out, can you use a mid-range or an entry-level camera body for wildlife photography? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. And it doesn't matter whether you're shooting with a Nikon, a Canon, a Sony, an Olympus, you know, whatever camera body. A entry-level or a reasonably modest camera body, you can definitely shoot wildlife photography. Now, is the autofocus as quick as a top-end body? No, of course not. And the D5600, the autofocus is definitely significantly slower than my D500 or my Z6 II. but the fact of the matter is I've got sharp in-flight shots of birds, so I can shoot wildlife with this camera body. That makes a great backup body if, you know, that's the only one I've got with me, or if everything else has failed, which hopefully will never happen. Yeah, so look, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you find it useful. I'm going to check all the pictures out now and zoom in tight to check the noise and the focus and the image quality, and I'm going to, obviously there'll be a big selection of those pictures that I've taken over the 2 days of this test, and let me know if what camera systems you use, whether you use top-end body or whether you use an entry-level body, and you know, what sort of success rate are you getting with your camera system, and also why did you pick that camera system. So if you can let me know in the comments section below, that would be great. So that's about it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video, as I say, and I'll speak to you on my next one. So bye for now. All the pictures that are coming up now were shot on the second day down at my local riverbank when the light was really nice. We had this lovely, warm, low winter sunshine, and because the light's more contrasty, it just makes the pictures look sharper. B, it's easier for the autofocus to lock onto the subject. So the first set of pictures of this young sort of cygnet, or youngish cygnet, that was really easy for the autofocus system. The cygnet wasn't moving around much. I had the autofocus on a single point, and I focused on the eye, and it's locked on, and you'd expect it to lock on and do a good job. But if you look at the detail that's in this shot, that 24 megapixel sensor, APS-C crop sensor, has recorded an amazing amount of detail. The picture's really sharp, it's really detailed, and it's a really good quality image. So, and this was shot at ISO 200, so we've got a really good ISO number, which gives us a low ISO number, which gives us a good quality image. The autofocus isn't being taxed too much because we're shooting in good conditions. The lighting is good for the subject, and that one is not moving around much either. But what this goes to prove, and the reason I put these pictures in, is because this camera, even though it's just above an entry-level body, is producing a really sharp, well-detailed, contrasty image, and I would be happy to use that anywhere. The last couple of pictures on this video are again of a black-headed gull, shot in really nice light. So this was on day 2 as well, and as you can see, the autofocus has done a great job. The light is contrasty, so it's given us a nice sharp picture, but the autofocus has got that bird in sharp focus, and I'm really pleased with these images. It was shot at ISO 200 again, around about a 1600th of a second, so a nice fast shutter speed, and the autofocus system was on a 9-point autofocus, and it was on continuous focusing. So the camera's going to try and track that movement, which is done again. It's done with a real success. So, you know, to sum up, can you shoot wildlife pictures with a mid-range or a entry-level camera body? Yeah, I think we've proved that. I'm really pleased with the results we're getting. Now, was every picture in sharp focus? No, it wasn't. And there's loads of pictures I took that I've not put on this video, and they weren't, you know, but many of them were sharp, but not all of them. But that would be the same if I was using my D500 or my Nikon Z6 II, and both those cameras cost a lot more money than the D5600, and it will be the same, as I say, for Canon, for Sony, for any other camera manufacturer. You know, it's hard to buy a bad camera these days. So my advice would be, if you're thinking about wildlife photography and you've got an entry level or a mid-level camera body, as long as you've got a lens that gets you close enough to the wildlife, so up to 500mm, 600 preferably, so a zoom lens, you can take great wildlife pictures. So thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as I say, if you have enjoyed it, if you can give it a like, a thumbs up, that would be great, and I will speak to you on my next video. So bye for now, guys.